Greetings, it's Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. Let's see. First thing I want to share is I got a report. This occurred last weekend down by Ski Lake. 3 kayakers. They were going along from, I believe it was the first entrance coming south. They were at that campground. They just parked there for the boat launch to use their kayaks. Well, they were about a mile and a half away, just skirting the lake. And there's this little pinnacle. I'll show it on the map. Well, according to what was shared, they were all 3 just kayaking along. The clouds had just broke and they were able to see the scenery a little better. And as they were coming up on this little pinnacle, because they're about not even 100 yards offshore, and they noticed this dark figure up on this pinnacle, and they thought it was just an odd tree of some kind, like a real dark, maybe an old burnt tree from the forest fire that happened a few years back. So they're, just paddling along, and when they got closer to it, all of a sudden it stood up and it took off out of view. And they were all startled. They just kind of stopped paddling, were looking at each other like, did you see that? Well, this thing got off out of view and screamed at them. And, they were looking around like, what the hell? So they stayed there a minute because they felt safe. They were in the water. They felt they could paddle away, whatever it was. And as they were sitting there, kind of talking amongst each other about what the hell, we think that's a Bigfoot or whatever. He said within 15 minutes, because they were intrigued. They were really looking to see where this thing went, right? Well, 15 minutes later, back up on top of some of these rock outcroppings up over on that side, they saw it again, and it was standing up. And then it squatted down and it appeared to be just looking down at them. So they sat there for a minute looking back. And then they decided, let's paddle on. One of the guys attempted to take a picture with his digital camera and nothing was happening. He would take the picture and the picture was just blanked out. Tried that a few times. It didn't work. They continued on. Nothing further happened. No further sightings, but when they continued on, the guy was able to take pictures just fine. So it was something real weird. Anyway, I just wanted to share that for anyone going down towards Ski Lake. There was a current sighting with just a couple days ago. That'll come into play a little further in the season. You guys will see. But anyway, so what I wanted to share with you today comes from Alexi. Alexi, this happened. He's in his early 20s now. It still affects him, but he was approximately 10 years old when this incident happened. He's from a village. It's on the YK Delta, the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. We'll leave it at that. Him, at the time, he was 10. His brother was 7. His little sister was 6. And there was an old cabin that someone had lived in years prior that had just dilapidated. The roof was partially collapsed, and that was their fort. That was where they would go and play. It was about a half mile from home, and it was their home base. You know how kids, they have their home base or whatever. So Alexi, because he was the eldest, he was looking after his siblings, and it was in mid-August, approximately 10 years ago, they go to their base, their fort. It was a little rainy out, really overcast, and they were basically playing in where there was some cover. The roof was partially collapsed and stuff, but they had their little spot in there where they would play. And Alexi said that when they got there was a weird feeling in the air, real odd. So they get up in there, and as they get up in there, his little sister squeals. Alexi was the last one to come up the 4 little stairs into this building with no door, windows all busted out. I mean, it was just basically a shell, right, with no doors, and the windows were busted. And as his little sister screamed, it startled him, and he's standing there, and his little sister's grabbing him and trying to pull him. And he's like, whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing? And she's pointing past him, so he turns around. He doesn't see anything. Calms his little sister down, and basically right inside the doorway, he brings his sister over in a little corner, and about 6 feet away from that corner is a busted out window. His brother didn't know what was going on either, so they're asking their little sister, hey, what's going on? She said it was a monster behind you. A big hairy monster was standing there. And Alexi didn't notice any shadow or anything. He was just like, what are you talking? What monster? And he goes to the doorway. He looks again. He's like, there's no monsters. Calm down. He turns around from looking out the doorway saying, see, there's no monsters. He turns around and he notices a dark shadow by that window kind of duck out of the way of the window. And immediately his hair stands up. His brother saw his reaction and reacted to it by getting scared and started crying. So he's got his little sister and his little brother crying, backs them into the corner, and they're kids. They're not armed. They're there to play. And, they're bear aware and all that. They're just kids being kids, And so he's got them behind him, and he's kind of standing in the corner looking towards that window. He's seen a shadow, but he didn't see anything. And then a minute later, he's seen a shadow by the door, and he saw this hand reach in just to the inside of the doorway, right? And he could tell it was like a human-like hand, but it was much, much bigger. And, I asked him for references, and he's like, it was like a big catcher's mitt or something, just a big hand, real big fingers. And he said just the hand came in, and as soon as he took a deep breath, like, like holy crap, this thing moved its hand. So he heard it, and from his angle in the corner, he couldn't see out the door. All he could see was a bit of a sliver of daylight because of the angle of the doorway, right? And he saw that little sliver of light black out, and then this thing moved around and went to the other side of the building where there was another smaller broken window over where the kitchen sink used to be. And he said they kind of all were sitting there like they were stuck. They were terrified. They had nowhere to run. And this thing came over and was slowly peeking in at them little by little. He said it started getting more and more comfortable, and they're just standing there petrified. His little sister's squealing bad. He had to keep telling her, be quiet, be quiet. Little brother's holding their mouth so she's not so loud, but it was still very, very terrifying, right? Because the little girl was just freaked out. Alexi said that as he was looking over, he could barely make out the face because it was silhouetted. They're in this dark structure. It's cloudy out, it's dark in there, but the only light is the window, so when something gets in front of it, it's just silhouetted, right? And so he said as he's looking, trying to figure out what the hell, right? He's sitting there looking, and he just yells out, leave us alone, real loud. It just kind of backed off a little bit, like, whoa, kind of a reaction, right? And Alexi said he started yelling at it and cussing at it to leave him alone. And this thing just was staring at him. He said he saw it move its hand and put it over on the other side of the window and lean over further, right? And he said he could tell it was hunched down because the way its shoulders were tilted, but its head was kind of cocked. He said it didn't look overly bulky. It kind of looked a little stringy. You know what I mean? And, I brought up, I was looking for size references. I was like, was it more like a Chewbacca type of, skinny kind of, lanky looking basketball player type or whatever? And that's the closest he could, come up with. Because again, they're petrified. His little brother's crying, his little sister's squealing, and this thing is just looking at him, right? Just basically sizing him up or watching him. I mean, we don't know. It could have just been curiosity. But he continues yelling at this thing, right? And he said he doesn't remember how long it was going on, but he kept getting anxious and yelling more, and this thing didn't seem to be disturbed by it. He said that it had to have been probably 20 minutes that he was, yelling. But again, chaotic, traumatic time frames. Sometimes it could have been a little longer, maybe a little shorter, because 1 minute could feel like an hour, let's be honest. And so Alexi was saying, as he was yelling and stuff, off in the distance, he heard his uncle. And he heard his uncle yelling their names. And he yells out, we're over here, we're at our fort. He keeps yelling that over and over, we're at our fort. As he's doing that, he's locked eyes on this thing. He's not taking his eyes off of this creature. He said as he heard his uncle yelling, getting closer, he saw the thing lean away from the structure and look back towards the direction his uncle was making noise. He said as his uncle got closer, this thing turned and walked directly away from the window, and he watched it walk away, and he couldn't fully see it until it got quite a distance away because of how tall it was when it actually stood up. He said it had to have been well over 10 foot tall. It was real kind of skinny looking. The hair looked unkept. It looked very not like a mangy dog, but it wasn't mangy. It was just thinner up on the shoulders, darker down the center of its back, more thick. And he said the hair almost looked like helmet head, but with quasi mullet type hair in the back, because he didn't get a good look at the face because it was walking away. He said you could tell it was muscular, but it wasn't like hulking, like humongous bodybuilder type, but you could tell it was cut. So he said once this thing was moving away and he heard his uncle get closer, he reached back and grabbed his little sister, was on his left, little brother on the right, and he grabbed him and came to the doorway to look out the direction his uncle was coming. They look out and they see his uncle has a rifle and he's pointed back in the direction of where this thing is walking. And his uncle starts yelling at him, "Get the hell over here, get the hell over here." So they take off, they don't have to be told twice. They run the hell over there and they get behind their uncle. And his uncle says, "You guys start walking, I'm right behind you. You guys get home, I'm walking right behind you." And so slowly they were walking and his uncle's walking backwards, just not saying nothing to the kids, just encouraging them, keep going, keep moving, come on, let's keep moving. And his uncle kept looking because according to what was said when they got home, his uncle told his mom the thing watched them the whole time they backed out of view, and as the road little path curved, this thing would just come up to where it could watch, and it always stayed in a position where it could just watch them but not fully expose itself, right? And so once his mom heard this, she like really freaked out. The uncle left, came back with a cousin of theirs, and they jumped on a Honda and went looking, run this thing off. Alexi said that about 15 minutes, after his uncle and their cousin took off on the four-wheeler, they heard a bunch of shots. Bam, 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 bam. And not too much longer after that, his uncle and the cousin came back. And his uncle said, hopefully we ran it off. It didn't want to leave. It kept going from group of trees to group of trees. And they would fire, and it would run over to the other group. They would fire some more, not trying to hit it, but just shooting in its direction. And then finally it took off and ran across the muskeg, heading away from the village. And there was a couple sightings over the years after that, but they would never go to that little fort they had ever again. Not only were they banned from it by the parent, but they wanted no part of it anyway. His little sister had nightmares for a number of years over it, and it's something that has never left him. And when I gather these encounters, the people will reach out, and a lot of times after the initial share, it's hard for them to reshare it. It's like they get it off their chest and they want no more to do with it. Well, I appreciate Lexi getting back a hold of me, just to make sure that I had things chronologically in order and on how it went down, because a lot of people will share and then just poof, disappear. Like they'll get it off their chest and they put it to rest and they don't want to visit it anymore, kind of thing, which I totally understand. I want to thank Alexi, especially for, keeping contact and reaching out and doing that. As he agrees with me because of the feelings they got. He said it was kind of curious, but he also felt like maybe they were, his little sister could be in danger, right? Because when they were standing there that time and he was yelling and cussing it out, he kept getting the feeling that this thing was more focused on his little sister than him. And it really bothered him because he felt so vulnerable as a child that he couldn't do anything to help other than yell and cuss at this thing, right? And he said he'd never forget how just massive it was when it moved away from the window. He said it wasn't overly wide, but the whole picture was just massive, really tall, and I asked him, well, what is your guess about how wide it is? And he said he didn't have a clue. It was big. and the hair was not all one color. It was, some of it was real dark, some of it was more blondish, some of it was like a reddish brown. So it was like a, you know, a goulash of colors or whatever, kind of grizzled. But thank him for sharing that. I appreciate it. Um, and again, this occurred approximately 10 years ago on the YK Delta. He hasn't talked about it. He talks to his siblings about it every once in a while. His sister no longer lives in the state. She went out of state for school and doesn't plan on coming back. His brother, he's somewhere around. His brother got heavy into the bottle, unfortunately, and he doesn't. You know, Alexi doesn't have much contact with them. But I want to thank them for. Well, I want to thank Alexi for sharing that, because some of these things, you know, they're hard to put out there. You know, who wants to say that they cried, or who wants to say that, you know, their family members messed up over it. You know, a lot of people don't want to do that, but it's appreciated that he's willing to share that. And what else? What am I forgetting? I don't know. It'll come to me at some point. I know I'm forgetting something, but thank you guys for joining me, and we will catch you guys real soon.